The second point is that there are, of course, risks to taking anything, but in particular to exploring augmentation of the growth hormone pathway. When people take growth hormone itself, there are common risks such as carpal tunnel syndrome. That has to do in part with the fact that it can potently increase cartilage growth. There can be active changes in the structure of one's head and face and body. There's a so-called lean but distended gut. So people that aren't carrying a lot of subcutaneous fat, but that the gut becomes extended. Sometimes you can get changes in the face like the, kind of a thickening of the bone above the brow. You'll see that. And sometimes people will look quite different after taking growth hormone for a series of time than they did before. It can really change one's stature and shape to a considerable degree. It also can create a kind of a skin texture that is a little bit unnatural or unusual. You sometimes can see this in people that take a lot of growth hormone. In general, when people take growth hormone promoting peptides, the changes in body structure are not as dramatic as when people take growth hormone itself. But body shape changes and cosmetic changes aside, keep in mind that anytime we augment growth hormone, either by taking growth hormone directly as a synthetic compound, or by taking a peptide that increases the amount of growth hormone that we release, we are increasing our tumor growth risk and our cancer risk. And that's because growth hormone and IGF-1 are somewhat indiscriminate in terms of the tissues that they promote the growth of. So if you have a tumor someplace and it's small, taking exogenous growth hormone or increasing the amount of growth hormone that you release by taking one of these peptides that we discussed will increase the size of that tumor. It's very likely. And you can imagine that if you're taking a peptide to increase growth hormone and you're taking something like BPC-157, something that a lot of people are starting to do nowadays, you could potentially increase both the size and the vascularization of a given tumor. So just keep that in mind. Just as there are anti-cancer drugs that focus on the VEGF pathway to try and discourage vascularization of tumors, there are drugs that discourage the release of growth hormone to discourage the growth of tumors. So if you're listening to this, you might be thinking, well, why in the world would anybody take this stuff? Well, people like the effects of having elevated growth hormone. They like the effects of recovering from an injury more quickly, but there's always going to be a trade-off between potential benefit and potential risk. The one thing that we can say for these growth hormone secretagogues, sermorelin, tesamorelin in particular, is that they are FDA approved as compounds.